Hi, Caroline Kearney here at Powell Arts with Leah Macdonald, who is a member of our juried show with her Merit Award-winning piece. Leah, could you introduce us to your piece?
Sure. This piece is called Grace, or I call it On the Edge, and it's I was just talking about my new word for my work, which is photogestic. So it's a photograph that I made into a collage, and then I painted it with encaustic paint. So it combines photo, collage, and encaustic painting.
So when you're doing something like this, because it's very elaborate, it has so many layers and intricacy, and your eye just wants to take a whole journey through it. When you're approaching a piece, how do you start?
So I start, I always taught, because I teach a lot of people and I've taught college and stuff, and I teach workshops on encaustic painting and photo encaustic painting. So I just call it like a funnel. And I usually take a group of images that I'm interested in working with. And because I feel like my work is so miraculous in a way that I have to make a lot of pieces, I have to be very prolific to get like something like this. Like just something that really works and is beautiful and speaks, and it has all the elements that I'm looking for that, you know, are suggestive of imagination and dream worlds and surrealism and beauty and fantasy. So it's like I have a very high expectations. So it's kind of like swing, like baseball, you know, like swing a lot and miss a couple. Yeah. So I work with a smaller field of images. I make a bunch of collages and paint them so that I can just be super intuitive and, you know when it's right. Just
that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
This is such an interesting, like encaustic. Well, I mean, photographs are very interesting, but encaustics add like such an interesting dimension to the collaging that you have. How do you determine, like, do you work with a specific palette? Like,
that's a really good question. So my background is black and white photography.
Okay.
So I started out, 35 millimeter film documentary photographer. Then I went to art school. Then I was like, oh, the female figure, nudes, so then I just kept going more and more and more, which is great because I've always had a really super vivid imagination. When I first started using encaustic, I was a very simple palette. There'd be a black and white image with one color over the top, and the colors would be fairly mild and close to historical photographic processes like brown or blue, so cyanotype and sepia type finishes. Really in the last couple of years, and my gallerist, one of my galleries in Woodstock, New York, Gallery BMG, he used to always say, well, give us more colors. And I was like, okay. But I was really nervous about it. So now I'm trying to, think about color. And I figured out, we were talking about process earlier. I'm sorry, I'm not going to go into all of that conversation.
No, love it.
But like developing a process that, consistently works for you is so helpful as an artist because there's an infinite number of possibilities.
Well, yeah, and you can rely on, we were talking about, you can rely on your instincts so that it can kind of ground you.
Right.
And you can trust your instincts because you know that the structure is there and you can go with your impulse to be creative.
Right. Oh my God, you just gave me chills. You're so brilliant. So it's so much about like even good positive relationships and building trust. It's like you need some structure to be able to, I call it fly off the handle.
I agree.
Okay, so I have that crazy vivid imagination, but luckily I have the discipline and the structure of all the analog photography and printing and sort of like doing it right. And now I feel like I really have all of the encaustic techniques and skills that I've worked really hard to gain, especially in like the last 10 years. And I've traveled and I've done residencies and studied people and contributed to the teaching scene. So I feel confident. So now I'm working, actually, it's almost like I'm trying to create that horizon line and split the tones.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
And the tones can be anything. Like I just did a purple and green one. So it's basically I figured out where my horizon line was going to be, and then I split the canvas.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, and then I could just paint it. It's crazy to watch me work because I literally sort of cover the whole thing, like completely cover it with wax. And then fuse it with a heat gun or a torch, and then scrape back. and destroy it, and so I
It's
cover
interesting
it.
how sometimes destructive processes can actually manipulate into something that's much more elaborate and complex and interesting and beautiful.
Yeah, it's so amazing. So I literally bury it, and then I always say it's like archaeology or going to find a treasure. So I'm going back to find my figure and sort of re-establish her form based on what the wax did to it.
That's so interesting. I love that you're explaining this because I can now see it within the piece. Where do you find your get your images from?
I take all my images.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I take all my photographs, and I often take. I started working photographing flowers. I like flowers, and I like the female figure, and I like that sort of dialogue in the dream space about them being together.
Well, and also historically, flowers and women were connected because flowers can be female.
Yeah, and I just actually read this book to my kids today. I teach middle school in North Philadelphia. And it's kind of like a give back in my career that I'm there in North Philly and with these kids. And I just read a book today called The Rainbow Goblins, and it's so cool in the book. It's the goblins are the bad guys, and they're trying to steal this rainbow, and they're talking about their plot to steal the rainbow, and it's the nature listens to them and then figures out a counter plan to stop them. But it's the flowers talk to each other, the moon tells them that the flowers.
I'm gonna have to read that.
You're gonna have to read
I love children's books.
Me too. I feel like we need to go back to that kind of stuff, especially in times like this when things are crazy on the planet. We need to go back to those children's books and to those basic ideas. And I've always been really attuned to nature. I love animals and I love natural organic processes. So the wax was perfect for me. I like alchemy, and I like heat and things changing sort of naturally. So there's a lot of that going on in there. Sometimes I even burn the photos before I start waxing them. So you never know exactly how much has gone into every one. And then at the end, it's really neat. I kind of decorate them. Okay. It's maybe even in a memorial sense, you'd bring flowers to a funeral. I always decorate the women after I've kind of covered them, undug them.
In this area here.
Yeah, and the flowers, and then I do a lot of, and then I hand paint the surface. So
this is such an intricate, beautiful.
So I can't say exactly how many layers, but there's quite a few. But it does follow that kind of it's a little bit like weaving. I always try to describe it like weaving, and people are
I see that. Yeah, because
I don't get it. They're I don't get it, but I'm glad you do.
No, because you're taking so many different elements and you're combining them together. Yeah. So that it's one thread comes to the surface and one recedes, and there's stuff in the middle to create a very full texture. And this is beautifully textured.
And I sort of want them to be fantasy but make sense. So I kind of put in those traditional horizon line and lights and darks about photography and contrast and depth of field, right? And so it's super interesting too how wax and photography are sort of intertwined when you use them a lot. Is because the thicker the wax, the blurrier the picture. Oh yeah. So it speaks to all that lens and camera stuff about depth of field, which is kind of fun too.
So that's so. Thank you for taking the time, and I hope that all of you will take the time to come see Leah's work in person at Powell Arts from mid-March till the end of May. Thank you so much.